Chapter 335, Quidditch. The Devil's Snare. Margals had cultivated had tendrils as hard as steel wire. Swords that would normally cut through vines simply bounced off. It was extraordinarily hardy, able to survive some time without taking root in soil, and lasting even longer if fed water or nutrients. Worse, it was bloodthirsty. It could pierce enemies with its barbed thorns and drain their blood to grow stronger. The more powerful the victim, the faster and more formidable the snare became. Margales had tamed the vine so it could contract and hide inside the hollow of a bracelet she always wore. When danger struck, it would burst forth like a giant net of living vines, protecting her and striking out at foes. With that bracelet, the herbology-obsessed Margales wielded a force that could not be underestimated. After the greenhouse incident, the students, covered in mud, trudged out and went back to their dormitories to wash and change. That day's classes were done. The next day, Phoenix House and Basilisk House joined for defense against the dark arts. Their professor was Brog, leader of the Black Barbarians, an expert in both the dark arts and defense, ranked among Dewey's top-tier wizards. Brog was an animagus who could take the shape of a falcon or a giant eagle, and having fused some frost dragon blood into himself, he commanded fearsome ice magic. He had even refined the freezing spell, originally a raw living charm, into a far more advanced technique. With a flick of his wand, he could freeze almost anything, even incoming spells. After defense against the dark arts, the students accompanied Dragonhouse back to the greenhouse for herbology. In the afternoon, they had history of magic with Thunderbird House. The class was a special one. 2 elven ladies arrived together. Lady Arwen, luminous and gentle, carrying a soft maternal glow from her pregnancy, and Lady Galadriel, tall, regal, and radiant like the moon, whose deep, penetrating eyes made people unwilling to look away. Arwen served as professor while Galadriel assisted, and their clear, graceful voices turned otherwise dry lectures into living scenes. Galadriel had taken part in many ancient events. When she spoke, the spiritual authority she radiated made everyone feel as though they had been transported into those bygone days, watching the great deeds unfold before them. When the bell rang, they came back to themselves, buzzing with excitement, the ancient histories now burned into their memories. On the third day, Phoenix House studied herbology in the morning, followed by defense against the dark arts and history of magic in the afternoon, and astronomy at night. By Thursday, the students were vibrating with anticipation. Today was flying class. Flying was irresistible. Brooms were the wizarding world's favorite mode of transport, and after Quidditch spread from the castle, their popularity had skyrocketed. Even the little elves were eager. Professor Gandalf taught flying. He looked elderly, but his movements were astonishingly nimble and his flying skills superb. His classes were informal. After a short demonstration, he sent the students up to practice. Most of the first years had only ever ridden toy brooms a meter off the ground, so when the 50-odd students mounted real broomsticks, the sky erupted into chaos. Some rocketed upward like fireworks, screaming. Some slammed into the castle walls. Some tumbled from the sky to the ground. It was pandemonium. But Gandalf, with uncanny aerial grace, went among them, catching flailing students in midair with one hand and saving them from broken necks. Handling them all felt like dealing with a swarm of human-shaped quaffles. Seeing the professor's confidence, the students slowly steadied themselves and began to get the feel of the brooms beneath them. Safe in the knowledge that Gandalf would intervene if things went wrong, they pushed harder, testing limits and favoring the most daring maneuvers. Screams and cheers rose above the castle for the entire lesson. Dewey stood at a tower window and watched the commotion, clicking his tongue. The method accelerated students' mastery of flying, but only someone as spry as Gandalf could manage that many novices at once, and Gandalf was clearly enjoying it. Before they knew it, a week had passed, and school life had settled into a steady rhythm. Moving staircases, talking portraits, patrolling suits of armor, a vast library of floating spellbooks, self-writing quills, and the Thunderbird, who often brought storms of rain and lightning to wash the grounds. All of it beckoned the students to explore beyond their lessons. That weekend, a lively event began. Gandalf, as flying master and Quidditch referee, officially assembled Quidditch teams for the 4 houses. Almost everyone signed up, and the little elves didn't want to miss out either. Each team would have 7 players, 1 keeper, 2 beaters, 3 chasers, and 1 seeker. Dewey even sponsored a golden snitch he had personally crafted. To keep the games fair and watchable, and to avoid matches decided immediately by a lucky snitch capture like in the Harry Potter stories, Dewey made several rule adjustments. He reduced the snitch's point value from 150 to 50, and stipulated that the game could only end by catching the snitch if the basic score difference between the 2 teams was greater than 50 points. He also set a hard cap on match length at 120 minutes. When time ran out, the team holding the snitch would be declared the winner regardless of the score difference. If the snitch had not been caught, the team with the higher score would win. These changes were meant to prevent stalling strategies, endless garbage time, and marathon matches that lasted days. Recall that in the Harry Potter world, the longest recorded match ran 3 months, and to keep Quidditch from becoming a seeker's solo show. Soon all 4 houses had formed teams, and the first campus Quidditch match began. Chapter 336, Year-End Dinner. The first year Quidditch matches were lively, but, by and large, a contest of amateurs. Dewey had just come down from the stands after watching Phoenix House face Basilisk House, and thought that as the student body grew in the coming years, the standard of play would become more entertaining. There were already standout players, particularly the elven children, whose natural physical gifts made them shine in Quidditch. Houses routinely put their elven teammates in the seeker position so they could grab the 50-point golden snitch first, widen the score gap, and seal victory. But when every house's seeker was an elf, catching the snitch became a much tougher task. Phoenix House's seeker was Aranir, a Sindar elf from Rivendell. His 2 roommates, Anlamir, a Dunedain, and Adam Bailey, who lived in Hogsmeade, were also on the team. Anlamir was a beater. Adam Bailey, despite lacking the same physical gifts as his roommates, knew Quidditch inside out and was excellent at organization and tactics, so he became keeper and captain. Basilisk House's seeker, in the match against Phoenix, was a Noldor elf from Lothlorien. Dragon House fielded a Sylvan elf from Mirkwood as seeker, and Thunderbird House's seeker was a Teleri elf from the Grey Havens. In effect, the matches between the 4 houses were not just about a cup, but a friendly contest among elven peoples, and none of the elves were willing to concede. They competed fiercely, making the games more than school sport. They became social events that spread through elven communities. At Hogwarts, the seeker position had long belonged to elves. Though Dewey had somewhat lessened the role's dominance, it remained crucial. Catching the golden snitch still shifted 50 points and could decide a match. If a team already held a 50-point lead, catching the snitch ended the game immediately. Elves, with their speed and agility, suited the role perfectly, though exceptional young wizards with brilliant flying skills sometimes outshone them and went on to become professional Quidditch players after graduation. The school's Quidditch season ran on a round-robin schedule, with matches once a month. By the time every house had played, it was May of 2962, and the term was drawing to a close. Exams followed, with a week of revision before finals. Between the end of December 2961 and the return to school on January 7th, students enjoyed the New Year break, a week that coincided with the Hobbit festival of Yule. Since Yule was both the last day of the year and the first day of the next in the Hobbit calendar, the holiday, together with its 6-day Yule season, came to be known by that name. During Yule, pupils returned home to their families, showed off the magic they had learned, and spread stories of Hogwarts across Middle-earth. Many children and their parents began to hope for a Hogwarts letter of their own. King Thengel of Rohan, who had a good relationship with Dewey, wrote personally to ask whether his son Theoden might attend Hogwarts. Born in 2948, Theoden was 13 now, the future king who would later, in the War of the Ring, be controlled by Saruman, freed by Gandalf, and eventually fall in battle. Thengel loved his only son and meant well, but it was clear Theoden had no magical talent. Dewey had to decline, explaining the situation politely. June came, and after a week of tense final exams, the first years finally relaxed. The end-of-year feast filled the Great Hall with candlelight, and the enchanted ceiling glittered with stars. Students from the four houses sat at the long tables, plates piled with sumptuous dishes, while the professors occupied their table at the front, talking and eating. After nearly a year together, they had come to understand one another better. Dewey sat in the center, constantly leaning toward his heavily pregnant wife, Arwen, a sight both familiar and comforting to those around them. Professor Luke of Charms, Professor Brogg of Defense Against the Dark Arts, and Professor Edward of Transfiguration discussed arcane matters. Professor Margles of Herbology laughed and chatted with Madame Amanda from the infirmary. Professor Ellensis, Potions Master, conversed with Professor Alpha of Astronomy. Gandalf said something that made Lady Galadriel laugh heartily. Her mirth rang through the hall and captivated the students below. When the last course had been cleared, Dewey rose. His voice was modest, but carried to every corner of the great hall as he announced the house scores. To his relief, the students had generally behaved well all year. No wandering at night, no fighting, no disciplinary problems. So the house point totals were tightly bunched and mostly reflected academic credit. In the end, Phoenix House edged out the others and won the House Cup. Dewey rewarded the victors with the customary honor and a modest purse of 100 galleons. Not a fortune, but enough to spark exuberant cheers from Phoenix House and hopeful resolve from the others. Professor Edward, the stern dean of Phoenix House, allowed himself a rare smile as he accepted the congratulatory handshakes. Dewey waved his hand, and the hall's decorations shifted to Phoenix House colors. Gold and red banners embroidered with a soaring phoenix unfurled everywhere. The Great Hall would display those colors until another house claimed the House Cup next year. Chapter 336, Leaving School and Conspiracy. Gandalf stood looking over the Great Hall, alive with laughter and the bright, careless energy of children, a smile never leaving his face. He turned to Galadriel beside him and said cheerfully, "This is truly wonderful, isn't it, lady?" Galadriel, caught by the warmth of the scene, smiled in return. The light around her softened. She nodded. "This joy is like nothing I have seen elsewhere, so free and full of life. Even the Blessed Realm cannot compare at this moment." She looked at Gandalf with a hint of mischief in her eyes. "So this is why you chose to stay at Hogwarts, Mithrandir. As a wanderer, not even Rivendell or Lothlorien could hold you, yet here you remain. It surprises me." Gandalf laughed, his eyes kindly as he watched the children laugh and play below. "These children are the hope for the future. I see infinite possibility in them. If Duir deserves admiration, it is not for whimsical inventions, but for founding this school and bringing these children together. He has spread magic to wizards, Dunedain, and elves alike, and perhaps others yet to come. When they grow, they will be a force against darkness. I can already see a golden age of magic on the horizon. Perhaps when that age arrives, even if Sauron gains power, he will no longer be a threat." Galadriel listened, the light of prophecy and wisdom flickering in her deep eyes, as if she had already seen such a future. Then a crease of concern formed between her brows. "Still," she said, grave, "we must ensure the spiritual safety of these children and not give Sauron any opportunity to corrupt them. We cannot let a single child be led into darkness." She remembered how mighty Numenor had been, how it had driven back Sauron and even captured him, yet had fallen because of corruption from within. Sauron's greatest weapon was not merely strength in battle, but the power to twist and seduce minds. As Hogwarts grows and trains more wizards, it will inevitably draw his attention. If he finds a way to seduce or corrupt these students, the consequences would be disastrous. Gandalf nodded. "Your worries are not unfounded. That is part of why I stay. With Narya's power, I can safeguard the castle against dark influences." He turned his gaze toward Duir with warmth and trust. "And we can trust Duir himself. He has made miracles already, and I believe he has planned for such dangers." Galadriel followed his look and saw Duir tending to Arwen. She softened. Duir, holding a golden cup of milk, was gently urging his wife to drink more. He had no idea Gandalf and Galadriel were speaking of him. Arwen had been pregnant for more than 2 years. By elven reckoning, she would give birth around the next semester, which would be March. Carrying twins, her belly was already large. Though her steps remained light, Duir was careful with every movement, fearful she might bump into anything. At Duir's insistence, Arwen had agreed not to teach in the coming academic year. Galadriel would substitute. Elven pregnancy draws nourishment and magic from the mother, and with twins the strain was even greater. Elrond had prepared a store of potions and nutritional tonics to keep his daughter from weakness. Mrs. Amanda, the castle's most skilled healer, stayed close to monitor Arwen's health. Duir, anxious and doting, had taken extraordinary measures. He had brought meat of a frost dragon and asked Galadriel to summon the finest elven chef from Lothlorien to prepare nourishing dishes. He used a golden cup, an item for healing and sustenance, to serve Entdraught and milk from the raw cattle to Arwen daily. The cup infused each drink with magic and vitality. Under such careful attention, Arwen had felt little discomfort apart from the usual heaviness of late pregnancy. With the year-end feast concluded, the school year was over. Early the next morning, the students left the castle in a steady stream, boarding carriages down to Hogsmeade, where waiting parents embraced them. Many pupils who had not seen family for a long time raced into arms, laughing. After farewells to friends, they returned home. Most households had fireplaces connected to the Floo network, so students could go home directly. Others chose the night bus. One could go anywhere it knew a place name, even to places beyond the Floo network. Students who lived nearby, like Adam Bailey, walked home along familiar lanes. Some detoured into Diagon Alley for sweets or lingered with friends until dusk, only to find, upon returning, that their parents had prepared a stern welcome home lecture. Hogwarts settled into quiet after the departures. Many professors left to spend the summer elsewhere. Gandalf resumed his wanderings on Shadowfax, riding from place to place and not due back until the next term. Duir, unused to the sudden stillness, soon devoted himself entirely to Arwen. With the end of the year and the late stage of her pregnancy, he planned nothing else for the moment. Far away in Mordor, within the Black Tower of Barad-dûr, a white-robed figure glided into the chamber and knelt before a greater shadow. "Master, what are your commands?" he asked. Sauron looked down at the pale form with satisfaction in his burning eyes. "Saruman," he said, "I give you a chance at vengeance. Infiltrate Hogwarts." He laid out his orders plainly. First, learn the whereabouts of the One Ring. Even if the ring is not in Duir's hands, it will be connected to him. Second, seize the Philosopher's Stone when the opportunity arises. The stone can remake a body. If you take it, you might be resurrected and regain your former power. Third, I will grant you a ring of power. Use it to corrupt and debauch those wizards, especially the young. I want Duir to feel the betrayal of the students he has raised. At the mention of Duir's name, Saruman's face twisted with a venomous hatred. Though now bound and serving Sauron, he still remembered Duir's hand in his downfall and nursed a deep grudge. He hesitated, voice edged with caution. "Master, Hogwarts is Duir's fortress. It bristles with protective spells, and Duir is no ordinary foe. I fear discovery the moment I approach." Sauron waved aside the objection. "Do not worry. I have devised a way that will ensure you are not detected, even if you stand before him." Saruman looked up, surprised. "What way is that, Master?" Sauron's gaze pierced westward, his voice cold with calculation. "Duir's school is for children with magical talent. They have just left for the holidays, and in 2 months the term will begin again. Find a child, possess him, and take his place as a student. From within the castle, you can move unseen. From there, you will find the ring, seize the stone when you can, and corrupt the next generation." Chapter 338, Hidden Gaze. In July, countless great snowy owls flew out from the castle, heading for every corner of Middle-earth. Along with shopping lists for returning students, they carried acceptance letters for the coming school year. Under the eager eyes of children across the land, the white birds, messengers of fortune, delivered the long-awaited envelopes. This year, the intake was larger than the last. Among the new recruits were not only young wizards from Dewey's realm, and elves from many regions, and Dunedain from the north, but also several Dunedain children from Gondor in the south. The nobles of Gondor, like the northern Dunedain, traced their lineage to the ancient Númenóreans. Over generations of intermarriage with other peoples, the line had thinned and lifespans had shortened to those of ordinary folk. Still, occasionally children would manifest a reawakened Númenórean heritage. Those who showed a gift for magic were noted by the accepting quill and recorded in the Book of Admissions, and a few such children had received letters this year. Ecthelion the Sioux, the regent of Gondor, was delighted that children from his realm had been admitted to Hogwarts. He even met them and their parents in person. He had long known of Hogwarts admissions, but what he regretted was that his own son, Denethor II, was already an adult and no longer eligible. The regent's family, direct descendants of Numenor, still retained many inherited abilities despite their shortened lifespans. Denethor's sons, Boromir and Faramir, for example, had both shown precognitive flashes. Before the War of the Ring, they had dreamed vague visions that hinted at the ring's presence. Denethor himself had some ability for magic. He had gone to Diagon Alley to buy a wand and magic texts, and Ecthelion had spent generously to hire a wizard, one who had completed a basic magical course, to tutor his son. Denethor never became a deeply learned magician, but he learned enough ordinary spells to be considered a competent common wizard. He had always been content with magic as a pastime. His primary purpose was to prepare to govern, since as the regent's son, he would one day inherit responsibility for the realm. By August, families of new students living far away used the portkeys that came with their acceptance letters to reach Diagon Alley and buy school supplies. Returning students avoided the busiest day for new students. Later, they came with classmates or parents to buy second-year books and other needs. After a busy August, September 1st arrived. New and returning students gathered in Hogsmeade. After farewells to parents, they boarded the carriages. The second years saw in the nervous newcomers reflections of themselves from a year before, and feeling like seniors, did their best to help the shy first years. Carriages crossed the bridge under the setting sun, entered the castle, and stopped outside the main gate. "First-year students, this way, please," called Professor Edward, the deputy head, who had been waiting. The bewildered newcomers shuffled forward and fell into line under his direction. At the sight of Professor Edward, the second years suddenly straightened and hurried into the great hall, eager to avoid drawing his attention. "Phew, he nearly scared me to death. Professor Edward is terrifying when he's serious," Adam Bailey said, collapsing into a seat in Phoenix House as if he had narrowly escaped. His roommates and friends, Aranir the Elf and Anlomir the Dunedain, laughed at his overdrawn reaction. "Edward's stern, but it's not that bad," Anlomir said, amused. Adam slumped over the table. "You don't have to worry. Your Transfiguration grades are excellent. I only got an A last semester in Transfiguration, so of course I'm nervous." Professor Edward was the head of their house, and a student who'd struggled in a subject tended to feel like a naughty child before a homeroom teacher, hoping to go unnoticed. Adam wasn't a poor student overall. Aside from Transfiguration, most of his marks were O for outstanding or E for exceeds expectations. It was only Transfiguration where he was notoriously unreliable. In the final exam the previous term, Professor Edward had asked him to turn a mouse into a snuff box. Adam had indeed transformed the mouse into an exquisite snuff bottle, but in the process many nearby objects had been turned into mice as well. Professor Edward's office had been overrun. Most of the creatures were caught and restored, but some had fled the office and sent students waiting outside into shrieks. A few had vanished entirely, burrowing away. The mishap had cost Professor Edward a shoe, a teacup, and a pocket watch. Furious, he had given Adam a dour mark of A, pass, in Transfiguration. The story had become a school joke. When the second-year students were seated, the professors took their places, and the great hall doors opened once more. Professor Edward led the new first years into the hall in two neat lines. The newcomers peered around with a mixture of awe and anxiety. The professors and returning students watched them with interest as the sorting ceremony commenced. There were more new students this year, 124 in all. After the sorting hat finished a newly composed song, the hat began to call names, and each time a student was placed, that house erupted into welcoming applause. When the sorting finished, Dewey briefly outlined a few important notices and then announced that the feast would begin. With only half a year until Arwen's due date, Dewey's attention remained close to the pregnant elf at his side. Just as he was turning his concern to her, he suddenly felt a cold, hostile gaze. He turned to locate it, yet saw only the students below. The feeling of malice was gone, as if it had been an illusion that had only just brushed past him. Chapter 339, The Birth of the Peeves. "What's wrong, Duir?" Arwen asked, noticing Dewey's unusual expression. Seeing his furrowed brow and then his wife's concerned face and rounded belly, Dewey's eyes softened and his expression returned to gentle. He shook his head and with a joking smile said, "It's nothing. I just feel like a student is secretly watching me. Probably some little admirer." Arwen laughed at her vain husband and let the small suspicion go, placing his favorite dragon steak on his plate. "Thank you, my dear," Dewey said with a grin, then buried himself in his meal. Though quietly, he had already fully activated his legitimacy. Suddenly, a torrent of noisy, jumbled thoughts flooded his head. A flash of pain crossed his eyes, but Dewey kept eating, his mental energy razor-focused as he strained to pick out and distinguish every student's thoughts. Time passed, and what he heard were the ordinary inner chatter of children, excited, trivial, countless, louder inside his mind than their actual voices. He finally withdrew his legitimacy. His face showed no change, but the solemnity in his gaze ran deep. Because he kept his head down eating, no one noticed. When everyone had eaten their fill, Dewey stood and waved his wand. A ribbon of sparkling letters shot into the air and hovered. "Now, everyone, please sing the school song in whatever tune you prefer," he announced cheerfully. "Ready? Sing!" Predictably, or exasperatingly, each student launched into the school song in a different key. The second years, the most exuberant, seemed determined to outshout everyone else. Chaotic harmonies and magical cadences filled the great hall, causing statues and portraits along the walls to clutch their ears. Some professors had even cast muffliato in advance to blunt the din. As the students sang, an invisible bond formed between them and the castle, growing stronger with each verse. Their emotional energy and surplus magic streamed toward one part of the building. Dewey watched them, wand poised, and could feel the castle's link to its pupils. That connection protected the students and constrained them, ensuring they couldn't harm the castle. He probed and examined those links carefully, but when the song ended, he still found nothing amiss. He was about to dismiss everyone when a violent magical fluctuation suddenly rippled through the castle. The sensation was felt by all. The castle hummed as if it had been struck. Outside, the thunderbird perched on the malong tree let out a thunderous cry, rose from its nest in a shimmer of electricity, and circled above. The enchanted ceiling filled with storm clouds and crackling lightning. The smell of ozone drifted down. Even Dragon Smog, sleeping beneath the castle, opened one enormous eye and bellowed a roar that shook the floor. "Is it an earthquake?" someone cried. "I heard something underground. Was that a dragon?" Another whispered. Students and professors alike murmured and glanced around in alarm. Only Gandalf and Galadriel looked composed, though surprise touched them too. Dewey raised his voice above the confusion. "Quiet!" His command reverberated through the hall, and everyone fell silent, turning to him. "Principal, has something happened?" Professor Edward asked, worry creasing his face. The other staff members watched Dewey, waiting for an explanation. Dewey smiled, surprise and delight mingling in his expression. "Don't worry. The castle just had a small incident, but it's a good thing. We have a companion who can't wait to meet you." "A companion?" People exchanged puzzled looks. Then Dewey said, "Everyone, please raise your wands." Without fully understanding, students and professors alike lifted their wands. Dewey flicked his wand and a silver thread sprang up to the clouds painted on the ceiling. The clouds shimmered as if caught by an unseen force. From every lifted wand, faint silver threads drifted upward and were drawn into the ceiling. The sight shocked everyone, especially the first years who had barely learned magic and had just, without meaning to, cast a spell. Gandalf and Galadriel, too, raised their hands. Rings hidden on their fingers glowed, adding a vast sweep of power. The ceiling clouds took on a silvery glow and condensed into a mysterious light. When the clouds cleared, a figure had formed within the silver. It was a ghostly presence, more solid than a typical spirit and unusually full of color. Short, about the height of a hobbit, with a round, broad face, a wide mouth, and bright, darting eyes, he wore gaudily colored clothes, a tie, a pointed nightcap, and clownish shoes. His hair and eyes were black, his skin pale. He looked like a prankster animated into life. He peered down at the students and, with a high, strange shriek, launched himself into the hall. He swooped over the students' heads, scattering them into crouches as they covered their heads. He snatched hats and upended them in midair, cackling wildly. The students stared, half in shock, half in disbelief. "What is that? Is it a ghost?" someone asked. Dewey's voice cut through the chaos. "All right, Peeves, no mischief." At the sound of his name, the new arrival paused, then hovered in front of Dewey. He cocked his head and peered at him with his round black eyes, feeling an odd and immediate fondness. "Peeves?" he repeated as if tasting the name. Before Dewey could respond, the little creature bounced and skipped in the air with delight. "Ha ha! Peeves! I like that name! From now on, I am the great Mr. Peeves." Chapter 340. Infiltrators. Students and professors alike stared in astonishment at the small figure bouncing through the air, the creature the principal had already named Peeves. "Principal, what exactly is that? It looks like a ghost, but not really," Edward, the vice principal, asked Dewey, voice full of confusion. The others turned to the principal, hoping for an explanation. Dewey didn't answer at once. Instead, he smiled and gestured to Gandalf and Galadriel. "Gandalf, Lady Galadriel, you are both learned and wise. You must know what this Peeves is. Would you explain it to everyone?" Gandalf deferred to Galadriel. She regarded the airborne troublemaker with bright, amused eyes. "All things shaped and sustained by time can give rise to spirits," she said. "Ancient forests, rivers, mountains, they may all bear them. This Peeves is the spirit born of this castle." A murmur ran through the hall, then a ripple of bafflement. "But this castle was built only a little over 10 years ago," Professor Edward protested. "How could a spirit be born from it?" Galadriel smiled and turned to Dewey. "That is thanks to your work, Principal. Things that give birth to spirits usually need ages for the spark to kindle, but this is no ordinary castle. Every stone is saturated with magic. Time's limits are different here. A spirit forming is not surprising." Gandalf nodded and added, "And if the castle is its incubator, then the children's laughter and restless energy are its nourishment. Peeves is an elf of sorts, born between the castle and its inhabitants." Hearing that, everyone's confusion settled into a kind of reluctant acceptance. Peeves was the castle's spirit. As its master, Dewey had the closest claim to control, yet watching the creature dart about, scattering floating candles and flicking warm wax at students with a wicked grin, the professors promptly regretted that fact. The spirit was rowdy and mischievous to the point of being unbearable. It lived up to the name Peeves. Vice Principal Edward, who handled the school's daily affairs, felt a chill. He had seen unruly children, but never anything like this. The instinct at the back of his mind warned him that Peeves was not the sort to be helpful. More likely, he would make trouble. The coming days, he suspected, would be less peaceful. Dewey felt a similar twinge. He had poured much of himself into the ritual that birthed the castle's spirit. In doing so, unconscious impressions from his memory had colored the result. The little being's temperament and appearance had leaned toward the image that had lodged in his mind, the consequence of a moment's whim during the spell. He regretted it now. Had he maintained tighter control, perhaps the spirit would have been a calm, dutiful house guardian instead of a prankster. But the moment had passed. As long as the castle stood and was occupied, Peeves would remain, feeding on the students' emotions and growing stronger with time. There were limits to Peeves's powers. Like a ghost, he could ignore physical attacks and pass through walls at will. Most ordinary magic could not touch him. Even dangerous dark arts could only hamper his movement, not end him. But unlike a typical ghost, Peeves could interact with the material world. He could drop candles, fling wax, snatch hats. The only true limit was his territory. He could not leave the castle grounds. Dew announced the end of the feast and dismissed the students to their houses. The 4 house heads shepherded the new students toward their common rooms, chatting excitedly about Peeves as they went. Peeves flew out of the great hall to begin his examination of the castle, and Dewey did not stop him. He escorted Arwen back to Amonsul Tower with Gandalf and Galadriel. After Galadriel had taken Arwen to her bed and departed, the 3 of them sat in the tower's living room. Gandalf lounged near the hearth, prodding the fire salamander with a poker while puffing on his pipe. Dewey sat opposite, brows heavy with thought. Gandalf glanced up. "Duir, something on your mind?" Dewey nodded. During the feast, I felt a hostile gaze coming from among the students. A hostile gaze? Gandalf put down his pipe and looked more intently. Are you sure it was from the students? Dewey met his eye. I'm sure. It was subtle and withdrew quickly, but it came from their direction. And you tried legilimency? Gandalf's voice tightened. Yes. Dewey's tone grew heavier. I read the students' thoughts. There was nothing, completely normal. Gandalf's face hardened. He had no reason to doubt Dewey's senses or his mastery of legilimency. Dewey's mind was among the most disciplined Gandalf knew, a mind he himself kept carefully guarded. If the children were truly ordinary, Dewey's penetration would have uncovered anything malignant. That nothing showed was the strangest sign of all. The only plausible explanation is that someone among them can evade legilimency, Gandalf said slowly. A child with that ability seems unlikely. Exactly. Dewey nodded. My suspicion is that an infiltrator is disguised as a student, Gandalf considered. And what will you do? For now, I'll look for anomalies in the admissions book, Dewey said. He walked to the hearth, took a pinch of flue powder, and tossed it into the flames. The fire flared green, and without hesitation he stepped into it. A moment later, the flames calmed, and Dewey reappeared at the edge of the room carrying a thick dragonhide volume, the Book of Admissions. Chapter 341, Investigation. Besides recording individuals with magical talent, the Book of Admissions can also tell whether the people listed are healthy and alive. If a magically gifted student loses their gift in an accident or dies, the book removes them from the list. Duir said this as he opened the dragonhide volume. The book floated silently before him, open to the second page where the new admissions for the year were neatly recorded. Duir checked each name carefully. Gandalf rose and came over to examine the list with him. There are 73 first-year students from my territory, 30 from Hogsmeade, 23 from Bree, and 20 from Isengard. No anomalies. There are 31 elves from Rivendell, Lothlorien, the Woodland Realm, Dorwinion, Lindon, and the Grey Havens. 17 Northern Dunedain and 3 Southern Dunedain are listed as well, all appearing normal. Duir's finger traced the names, but he saw no dimming or graying, nothing deleted or flagged. His gaze lingered on the 3 Southern Dunedain recruited from Gondor. Their closeness to Mordor made him uneasy. Apart from Mordor, he could think of no other power that had cause to bear him a grudge. He suspected Sauron might be secretly stirring trouble. He thought it best to keep watch in secret. If he could put his suspicion to rest, it would be a relief. Gandalf seemed to understand. If it's Mordor, it won't be obvious. We should screen not only the first years, but the upper years as well. Duir agreed. That was his thinking exactly. Still, he asked Gandalf, Gandalf, I'll need you to pay extra attention to the first years. See if anything appears amiss among them. Gandalf nodded. Leave it to me. We mustn't let a male factor spoil the children's time here. Gandalf's flying class was where students were most likely to reveal their true natures in the heat of rapid flight. With Narya's keen perception of emotion and Gandalf's own wisdom, any flicker of hostile intent would be detected. At that moment, Galadriel descended the stair slowly, and having overheard them, said, I will take over History of Magic this term for Arwen, so I can watch the second years. Then I'll trouble you, Lady Galadriel, Duir said without ceremony. Galadriel gave him a small shake of her head and asked, You're not planning to tell Arwen about this, are you? Duir's face hardened with worry. Arwen isn't far from her due date. If she hears this now, it will only add to her anxiety. You know how much she cares for her students. Arwen had always been gentle and even-tempered. She was beloved by both students and faculty. Since becoming pregnant, her protectiveness toward the students had only increased. If she learned there might be a malicious presence among them, she would be unsettled. Duir was also afraid the shadowed figure might target Arwen. I want Arwen to go to Rivendell or Lothlorien to rest until we catch this rat, he said. Only you can persuade her without making her suspicious. Duir's unease cut deep. He feared faint harm near her due date could haunt him forever. Sending Arwen somewhere safe felt like the only sensible choice. Galadriel agreed at once. I will speak to Elrond. Rivendell has a well-equipped infirmary and the finest physicians. It's the safest place for Arwen to await her child. On the first weekend of term, after letters from Duir and Galadriel, Elrond arrived at the castle and took Arwen back to Rivendell. With Arwen safely away, Duir breathed a measure of relief and concentrated all his resources on unmasking the shadowed presence. Gandalf and Galadriel watched covertly in class. Portraits throughout the castle became Duir's eyes and ears, constantly observing students for any sign of abnormality. Duir consulted a Palantir himself, scanning for anything suspicious. Even Peeves was given a mission: find the shadow ghost. As the castle's spirit, Peeves knew the place as well as Duir did. Yet a month passed with no result. Whoever was hiding had sensed danger and disappeared among the students, never once revealing themselves. Neither Gandalf's flying class nor Galadriel's history of magic turned up any anomalies under the scrutiny of two of Middle-earth's greatest minds. Every student examined behaved like ordinary children. It began to feel as if Duir's fear had been imagined, but Gandalf and Galadriel did not doubt him. If anything, their vigilance increased. Someone who could conceal themselves so perfectly was dangerous indeed. That month without contact made Peeves unpopular. He delighted in darting from dark corners at students and shouting "Gotcha!" as he pinched their noses. He scrawled on the walls and tossed trash, moldy bread and cheese at passersby. He caused havoc in classrooms, sneaking under desks and popping out during spells so wand sparks flew wildly. At night, he slipped into dormitories, stole pajamas and nightcaps, and pinched sleeping students awake. Complaints poured into Duir from students and professors alike. Seeing the public anger, Duir ordered Peeves kept out of the dormitories and forbidden to disrupt classes. The students and staff relaxed. Outside of study hours, minor mischief was tolerated, and many students still enjoyed chasing Peeves in games of cat and mouse. Meanwhile, in a dormitory, one student slipped a gold ring set with a sapphire from under their pillow. The ring was plain at a glance and gave off only subtle fluctuations of power. To the casual observer, it would have seemed an ordinary gold band. Yet an evil influence pulsed from it, seductive and corrupting. In the shadows, the students' eyes glittered with malice and a cruel smile spread across their face. "Duir," the student whispered to themselves, "I'll give you a surprise." Chapter 342, Accident. Another month passed in the blink of an eye. The school remained as peaceful as ever. Nothing major happened, aside from Peeves' daily antics of outsmarting students. Dewey, Gandalf, and Galadriel kept a calm facade, but beneath the surface, they were all on edge. 2 months after the term began, they still hadn't found the lurking saboteur, which frustrated Dewey. How do you stay perpetually on guard against a thief who only needs to strike once? He refused to let someone brazenly undermine the school under his nose. This looked like nothing less than a provocation. He could picture the hidden culprits sneering at their fruitless hunt. 2 months of searching, with him, Galadriel and Gandalf working together, and no result. That only proved the person was hard to catch. Dewey decided to try another approach. If the hidden individual was dangerous, especially with over 200 students at the school, any harm could be irreversible. He thought of the Marauders map. The Marauders map had been made by James Potter and his friends. It showed Hogwarts and, in real time, the names of everyone and every ghost within. Not even someone as powerful as Dumbledore could hide from it. Dew didn't know the exact method the Marauders had used, but with his current skills in alchemy and magic, creating one shouldn't be hard. After all, the Marauders were only in their 4th or 5th year when they made it. Given Dewey's abilities, a faithful replica would take him at most half a month. The most tedious part of making such a map was drawing a complete, detailed blueprint of the castle, not overlooking a single room or corridor. The original Marauders had spent 6 months on it. Dewey didn't have to spend that long. When he had the dwarves build the castle, Balin had left the castle's design blueprints behind. Skipping the survey, Dewey drew the full map on a piece of dragon hide using indelible ink. The castle, Weathertop, part of the Black Lake, every passageway. But just as he was making progress, the hidden person seemed unwilling to give him the chance. After 2 months of lurking, they finally struck. November in Eriador brought chilly north winds. The Black Lake below the mountain had a thin skin of ice that glittered in the weak winter sun. The villagers of Hogsmeade had bundled themselves up, preferring to stay by hearths and only venture out when necessary. Hogwarts, however, was different. While snow and wind bit at the valley below, the mountains still felt like spring. The golden Maolong tree and the silver-white tree gave off a warm glow. The lawns stayed green, and the garden's flowers still bloomed, spilling their scent. Even the mountain forests showed no sign of frost. That vitality came not only from the white tree and the Maolong tree, but also from Galadriel and Gandalf. As bearers of Narya, the Ring of Fire, and Nenya, the Ring of Water, their presence had altered the surrounding environment. Time at Weathertop itself seemed slowed. Where other places had entered winter, Weathertop remained spring-like and alive. In that warm, comfortable pocket of the world, the castle prepared for another Quidditch match. Most students and many professors gathered on the Quidditch pitch to watch Phoenix House take on Basilisk House. Dewey, however, was alone in his office finishing the Marauders map when hurried footsteps sounded in the corridor and a knock came at his door. "Come in," he called. "Principal, something's happened." Professor Edward burst in, breathless and anxious. At the sight of him, Dewey's expression hardened. "What is it?" During the match, several of Phoenix House's broomsticks malfunctioned and disintegrated in midair. Several players fell from great heights. If Professor Gandalf hadn't reacted so quickly to catch them, they would have been gravely injured, or worse. Dewey's face darkened. What exactly happened? Why did the brooms disintegrate? Who did this? Have you found them? Edward shook his head. "I came looking for you because Professor Gandalf and Lady Galadriel asked me to fetch you." "Then let's go," Dewey said, standing at once. When they reached the pitch, the crowd had already been dismissed and sent back to the castle. Only Gandalf, Galadriel, Professor Ellensis, Potions Master and Dean of Basilisk House, and a Basilisk House student in Quidditch robes remained. Gandalf and Galadriel looked grave. Professor Ellensis wore a dark, troubled expression. The student was sobbing openly, face twisted with fear and remorse. Dewey glanced at him. He recognized the boy as a first year, one of the 3 Southern Dunedain from Gondor. "Gandalf, Lady Galadriel, what happened? Have you found who sabotaged the brooms?" he asked bluntly. Gandalf nodded, his gaze settling on the weeping student. "Thanks to Lady Galadriel's quick observation, we saw who acted. It was this student, Angmar. He snuck into the Phoenix House broom closet before the match and used Alohomora to tamper with the broom's internal mechanisms. That damage caused them to disintegrate in flight." Dewey turned to Angmar. "Mr. Angmar, explain yourself. Why would you deliberately damage those brooms? Do you understand that you could have killed your classmates?" Dewey had been keeping a close eye on these students while investigating the lurker. He remembered Angmar as a shy, introverted boy from a fallen noble family, ambitious but not the sort to do something so monstrous. Angmar trembled, tears streaking his face, eyes full of fear and regret. "Woo, Principal, please don't expel me," he wailed. "I don't know why I did it. There was a voice in my head telling me to destroy the Phoenix House brooms, saying then we'd win and get the Quidditch Cup. I didn't want to, but I couldn't control myself at all." His voice broke into another flood of sobs as Dewey, Gandalf, and Galadriel exchanged looks that were equal parts concern and alarm. Chapter 343, The Lost Ring. Listening to Angmar's fragmented words, Dewey's face grew increasingly grave. He had used legilimency. He knew the boy wasn't lying. "All right, Angmar," Dewey said, his voice softening to reassure him. "You don't need to be afraid. I believe you, but I need to examine you with magic to be sure. Don't resist, okay?" Angmar nodded, sniffling. Dewey raised his wand and spoke a spell. A white light flowed over the boy, scanning for abnormalities. Soon a smear of dark arts energy showed up within Angmar, stark and glaring against the holy white light. With it came an aura of temptation and corruption that made Dewey, Gandalf, and Galadriel's expressions harden. It was only a residual trace and could not harm them, but it was unmistakable. The 3 of them, and Dewey especially, recognized it intimately. Apart from Sauron, Dewey could think of no other source of that particular corrosive darkness. Cold disgust flashed across Dewey's face. He had long suspected who was working in the shadows. Now he felt his hatred for Sauron flare. Still, seeing Angmar's frightened, collapsing figure, Dewey tamped down the anger and lifted his wand again. Expecto Patronum! A Phoenix Patronus burst from his wand, surrounding Angmar in pure, cleansing light and driving away the lingering dark arts. Since Dewey's animagus form was a phoenix, his Patronus had taken the same shape. It shone with white, hopeful magic, especially potent against the dark arts. The trace on Angmar dissipated quickly. The boy sagged and breathed easier. The tempting voice in his head was gone. He didn't know what Dewey had done, only that it helped. Tears in his eyes, he looked at Dewey with both gratitude and lingering fear. "Please, headmaster, don't expel me," Angmar begged, his voice trembling. "I'll accept any punishment. I don't know why I did those things. I couldn't control it. It felt like two people living in my head." "I believe you," Dewey said gently. "I know you didn't do it on purpose. Relax, you won't be expelled." Then he asked, turning his attention to facts, "Have you come into contact with anything or anyone unusual recently? Anything that made you feel drawn to it?" Angmar blinked, the tears clearing his eyes. He shook his head at first, then flinched as if remembering something shameful. He couldn't meet Dewey's gaze. "A few days ago, I found a golden ring. It looked very expensive. I kept it." The three of them were instantly on guard. Rings were dangerous, too sensitive a thing for complacency. "Where did you put it? Can you take us to it?" Dewey asked, trying to keep his urgency in check. Angmar hung his head. "It went missing before the Quidditch match. The voice stopped when it was gone. I damaged my broom because I was so distracted and scared of being found out, so I don't know when it disappeared." Dewey confirmed Angmar wasn't lying, and his heart dropped. A lead had appeared and vanished. Whoever was behind this was careful. He pressed on. "Where did you find the ring? Did anyone see you pick it up? A roommate? A classmate?" Angmar answered in a small, uncertain voice. "On the sink in the second-floor bathroom. It was just sitting there. I thought someone had forgotten it, so I kept it secret. No one knows I had it." Dewey frowned. The second-floor lavatory was public. Anyone could have dropped it there. More troubling, the placement looked deliberate. Someone had left the ring where a student might find it, then taken it back later. Gandalf and Galadriel shared Dewey's looks and his concern. Galadriel's voice echoed in Dewey's head, the three of them now communicating silently. "That ring radiates temptation. It must be one of Sauron's rings of power," Dewey thought, and the others felt the conviction. "Among the 9 given to men, 2 I destroyed myself. The remaining 7 sustained the Nazgul. Sauron wouldn't casually abandon one. Among the dwarf rings, 3 were once in Sauron's hands. I have already broken one, leaving 2 unaccounted for. The most likely explanation is that Sauron entrusted a dwarven ring to his agent to place inside the castle." "Do you think a ring wraith is responsible?" Gandalf asked mentally. Dewey's eyes went dark. "Not a ring wraith. Those creatures, however furtive, can't hide their corruption from the 3 of us. I suspect Saruman. He alone could evade our detection. When I destroyed his body, his soul fled toward Mordor. He may have been aided by Sauron and restored much of his power. It would make sense for Sauron to send him to hide among the students." Gandalf and Galadriel nodded in the quiet, accepting that line of reasoning. Galadriel asked aloud, "What does Saruman hope to gain by lurking here?" Dewey and Gandalf exchanged a look, their minds converging on the same prize. "Sauron wants his One Ring above all," Dewey said. "He must suspect I know where it is, or think it might be with me, so he sent Saruman to find it." Gandalf added, "And don't forget the Philosopher's Stone you carry. It can remake a body. Neither Sauron nor Saruman would let such a thing pass unused." "I know," Dewey said. "I carry the stone with me. I won't give Saruman the chance." A shadow of worry crossed Galadriel's face. "You must also find that other ring quickly. Sauron's corruption on it is powerful. Even we can be tainted by prolonged contact, let alone children." Dewey's jaw set. They had to act. The ring had been planted, the voice in Angmar had lured him, and the ring had been taken again, likely by the one hiding among them. If Saruman was indeed masquerading as a student, they were dangerously close to the very heart of the problem. Chapter 344, Black Death. After deducing who the lurking intruder might be and why he was there, Dewey, Gandalf, and Galadriel tightened the school's surveillance. The other professors were alerted as well. Everyone was on edge. The 4 house deans were ordered to account for every student in their houses and to forbid anyone from roaming alone. Professors increased their patrols, and portraits were posted in every corridor to act as watchful eyes. The castle's atmosphere went from casual to charged in a single day. The students were bewildered. All they knew was that since the Quidditch match in which brooms had disintegrated, the staff had grown grim and strict. Still, they obeyed. Outside class hours, they stayed mostly in their dormitories and common rooms. If they went out, they traveled in pairs or small groups. Even Peeves, usually a constant nuisance, quieted down. As a spirit of the castle, he felt the change in the air and knew something serious was afoot. More than anything, he resented whoever had come to spoil his opportunities for mischief. Furious, he vowed to catch that hidden rat himself. Peeves began prowling the walls, listening at doors and hiding in places portraits couldn't watch. Toilets, behind tapestries, inside empty sinks, ready to spring on any sneaking student. When he found someone skulking, he would burst from a wall or toilet, give the culprit a brutal pinch, and shout, "Gotcha! Little rat, Peeves sees everything." Most of those he hauled out turned out to be kids sneaking food or trying to play hooky, not the suspect. But Peeves's antics kept the troublemakers in line and forced whoever was hiding in the shadows to lie low, if only for a while. The professors couldn't understand one thing, though. What kind of student thought it was a good idea to eat in a toilet? Dewey himself could only shake his head. As for Angmar, the first year who had been found with a ring of power, Dewey punished him with a 50-point deduction for carelessly picking it up and sent him back to his house. Dewey deliberately kept quiet about Angmar's role in the Phoenix House broom incident, presenting the punishment as a breach of school rules rather than revealing any influence of the ring. Angmar had, in fact, come under the ring's sway and had nearly caused the death of other students. Making that public would have focused blame on him and risked inflaming tensions between houses. Dewey then had Angmar's roommates and classmates investigated to see whether Saruman might be hiding among them. After all, the ring had been placed with clear intent. No evidence of a dark presence surfaced. The roommates showed no taint, no sign of having touched a ring. Dewey wasn't disappointed. Containment and caution were more important than spectacle. He strengthened surveillance and put Gandalf and Galadriel in charge of its implementation. Meanwhile, he redoubled his own efforts to finish the Marauders map. Fueled by a vitality potion and guided by the Crown of Wisdom, he worked day and night, and progress flew. From the shadows, Saruman seemed to sense something and grew uneasy. Just as Dewey was on the verge of completing the map, another alarm came. Edward pounded on the headmaster's office door, breathless. "Something's happened," Edward blurted. "It's 3 students from Dragon House," he gasped. "Gandalf and Lady Galadriel are already at the scene. They want you there right away." Dewey's stomach dropped. He didn't ask for more. He grabbed his cloak and hurried toward the kitchen. He arrived to find 3 second-year Dragon House students lying unconscious on the cold stone floor, and standing over them were Gandalf, Galadriel, and Dean Margales. Peeves hovered in midair nearby, tap-dancing with a Quidditch bat, proudly proclaiming, "Peeves caught the culprit." Dewey's eyes narrowed. He knelt and checked them quickly. All 3 were still breathing. 2 bore signs of a stupefy, their magic knocked out, and the third had a large, ugly bump on the back of his head, as if struck with a club. "What happened here?" Dewey demanded. "Gandalf, Galadriel?" "We only arrived a step before you," Gandalf said. "They were already down when we came. Ask Peeves. He saw them first and had the portraits notify us." Dewey looked up at the poltergeist. "Peeves, tell me exactly what you saw." Peeves puffed himself up and preened. He pointed at the boy with the bump and babbled theatrically. "Oh, it was terrible. Those 3 boys snuck into the kitchen and I followed them quietly. I saw the whole frightful thing. That one, that bad boy. He led the others here. Then he cast a spell and ambushed them from behind. He knocked 2 of them out with a stun and looked so scary I hid inside the wall and only peeked through a crack. Then he took out a black little bottle and was going to pour something into the dinner. But I leapt out and knocked him senseless with this." He brandished the bat boastfully. He trotted forward and produced a tiny black bottle with a dramatic flourish. Peeves knew at once it was evil. "I snatched it." Dewey moved to take the bottle, but Gandalf and Galadriel's faces went ashen. They spoke in unison, urgent and cautious. "Dewey, don't touch it." Dewey's hand stopped. He raised a levitation charm and lifted the bottle without making contact. The liquid looked pitch black, chilled as if it drank the light. He looked to Gandalf and Galadriel. "Do you know what it is?" Galadriel stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as she reached out with her senses. She studied the bottle, then lowered her face, solemn. "This is the Black Death Plague," she said quietly. "A most wicked and deadly virus." Chapter 345, The Ring Appears. When Dewey heard the words plague virus, his hand trembled so hard he nearly dropped the black potion vial. He instinctively took a step back. A plague. This was no ordinary contagion. He immediately cast several wards to isolate the vial and sent cleansing charms toward Peeves and the students who had fainted. They had all come into contact with the vial. Even touching the container could be dangerous. Better safe than sorry. Gandalf stared at the vial with a grave expression and sighed. "I remember this plague. It came from the east on a black wind. The Black Death swept across Middle-earth, killing the infected and devastating whole regions. King Telenar of Gondor and his heirs perished. The White Tree withered. Osgiliath became a ghost city. Over half the people and livestock of Rhovanion died, and Cardolan was wiped out. I thought the Black Death had been gone for 1,000 years. Gandalf added, disgust and anger in his voice. But it still exists, and someone has brought it to Hogwarts. This is the work of Sauron and Saruman. They mean to unleash the Black Death here and spread it through the castle. This plague is cursed. Contact causes continuous contagion. Even if the infected don't die, they'll be crippled." Dewey felt fear at that thought, then a cold fury. Saruman and Sauron were unscrupulous enough to use such a weapon. If the vial had made its way into the kitchen, the food and drink could have infected everyone, from the professors to the students. Wizarding remedies might keep many alive, but chaos would follow, and in that confusion, Saruman could act. Worse, with students from across Middle-earth carrying it away, the plague could spread to Hogsmeade, Bree, Isengard, and beyond. It could become another devastating pandemic. He would not take any chances. After reinforcing the protective spells around the vial, Dewey sealed it inside a mithril box and nested that box inside several more layers of containment, hermetic wards and physical casings, so leakage was impossible. There was no cure here. For now, the only option was containment. Only then did he allow himself to breathe. He turned his attention to Peeves, who was hovering nearby looking smug. "Peeves, you did well," Dewey said. "You prevented a catastrophe. Think about what reward you want. If it's not too outrageous, I will consider it." Peeves' eyes lit up and his grin split his face, but Dewey did not linger. 3 students lay on the ground, 2 struck by stupefy and 1 knocked out by Peeves. Dewey cast a healing charm. The 3 stirred and regained consciousness. The 2 who had been stunned were disoriented at first, then anger and confusion returned. "Iman, why did you attack us? Professor, how did you get here?" They blurted out. As the 2 students sat up, their eyes landed on Iman, the second-year Dragon House student, more precisely on the ring glinting on his hand. At first glance, it could have been an ordinary gold ring set with a diamond, but Dewey, Gandalf, and Galadriel all sensed a dark malignancy radiating from it. "Mr. Iman," Dewey said solemnly, "where did you get that ring?" Iman startled and instinctively tried to hide his hand behind his back. Dewey and the others frowned. Gandalf softened his tone. "Iman, that ring is dangerous. Prolonged contact will harm you. Please take it off and let us secure it." But Iman only grew more guarded. He clenched his fist and edged away. Gandalf activated the calming power of his ring of fire and approached slowly, attempting to soothe Iman and persuade him to remove the ring. Iman muttered to himself, head bowed. When Gandalf reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder to soothe him, Iman snapped his head up. His face had changed. A feral madness burned in his eyes, possessive, panicked. He suddenly lunged at Gandalf. "My precious, this is mine. No one can take it away." Before he could reach Gandalf, Dewey froze him with a Petrificus Totalis. Moving without expression, Dewey pulled on dragonhide gloves, went to the petrified boy, and in Eamon's terrified, struggling gaze slipped the ring from his finger. The moment the ring left him, the fever in Eamon's eyes ebbed. He looked bewildered, then horrified. Tears welled and began to fall. Dewey released the spell. Eamon, freed, recoiled instinctively from the ring, even as some shadow of greed still lurked in his gaze. "Principal," he stammered, voice shaking. "I didn't mean to. I don't know why I did it. Please don't expel me." He trembled with remorse and confusion. Dewey held the ring with dragonhide gloves on. Even through the thick leather, he felt a tug of temptation, an urge to slip it on. He forced himself to throw it onto the table and took several steps back, breathing out in relief. Gandalf and Galadriel gathered around, studying the ring. "This is the Ring of Thror," Gandalf said, astonished, "the last of the 7 dwarven rings." He explained its history. The Ring of Thror was a treasure of Durin's folk, once held by Thrain II, Thorin Oakenshield's father. In TA 2845, Thrain II was captured by Sauron's agents en route to Erebor. He was imprisoned and tortured in Dol Guldur, and the ring was taken by Sauron. Somehow, that dwarven ring had now appeared at Hogwarts. Sauron had infused the 7 dwarf rings with malign power, intending them, like the 9 given to men, to enslave their bearers and eventually make them wraiths under his control. He had not counted on the dwarves' stubborn will. Forged by Ole, the smith, dwarves possessed a resilience that resisted Sauron's mental dominion. The rings did not turn dwarves into wraiths. Instead, they amplified their avarice and love of gold. But on men, or others of less steadfast will, a dwarven ring could be almost as dangerous as the One Ring. Worn long enough, it corrupted and bent its bearer towards Sauron's purpose. Dewey, Gandalf, and Galadriel exchanged looks. The threat they had just averted went far deeper than a cursed vial. Someone had set into motion both a plague and a corrupting ring. Hogwarts had narrowly escaped a disaster, and the true hand behind these things was still at large. Chapter 346, Corrupting Students. The dwarven ring was extremely dangerous and should never be handled directly. Dewey quickly produced a mithril box and locked the ring inside for later disposal. Then his gaze turned back to Eamon. "Mr. Eamon, tell me where you got this ring," Dewey asked. "Who gave it to you? And who gave you that vial and told you to put it in the food?" Under Dewey's steady scrutiny, Eamon felt as though everything had been stripped away. He trembled, tears running down his face. Fear and confusion warred in his eyes. "I can't remember clearly who gave it to me," he stammered. "I thought it was a classmate from the same house, but I can't picture him. I only remember he spoke to me, and then I went all groggy and wanted to obey him. He gave me the ring to wear and the vial with instructions to sneak into the kitchen and poison the food and drinks. The dean says students shouldn't act alone, so I convinced my 2 roommates to come with me. Lots of us sneak to the kitchens when we miss meals, so they didn't suspect anything. I didn't mean to hurt anyone," he sobbed. "I used stupefy to knock them out. Please, please don't expel me. I'll accept any punishment." Dewey's legitimacy confirmed what the boy said. He was not lying. Gandalf and Galadriel, standing nearby, could also see the truth. The 3 exchanged looks and grew even more solemn. Dewey placed a hand on Eamon's shoulder, speaking gently. "Don't be afraid, Mr. Eamon. No one here will expel you. I know those weren't your true intentions. I suspect you felt the ring's seductive pull. Even we cannot easily resist its power, much less a young student. You need not bear this burden alone." He turned to Eamon's roommates. "I imagine you 2 won't blame him." They both nodded vigorously. They had heard everything, and now knew Eamon had been controlled by the ring and by whoever handed it to him. "Please take Mr. Eamon to the infirmary and hand him over to Madame Amanda for treatment," Dewey instructed, "and keep this matter confidential." They agreed and led their friend to the infirmary. Peeves had struck Eamon hard on the back of the head with a baseball bat, and although Dewey had healed the swelling, the brain was delicate. Eamon needed a physician's examination. More worrisome, he had been exposed to the dwarven ring long enough for its influence to take hold. Some effects could not be undone quickly. Elrond, the preeminent healer of Middle-earth, might later need to be asked to cleanse Eamon completely. For now, however, the immediate priority was finding Saruman, who was clearly acting within the student body. Dewey was furious. Had Peeves not stumbled upon Eamon and intervened, the poisoned food and drink might have been consumed by faculty and students, and the school would have been devastated. He ordered all students to return to their dormitories under the supervision of their house deans, and together with Gandalf and Galadriel, rushed to the Dragon House common room. Eamon had said the person who approached him was a classmate from his house, and the trio began their sweep there. All 50 or so students of Dragon House were present, except Eamon. Before them, Dewey minimized his words and raised his wand, scanning each student and observing their expressions and inner thoughts. A soft white light flowed out as he checked them, and the students, confused but compliant, lined up. Everything seemed normal until a first-year witch's turn. A residual black aura flared around her, recoiling from Dewey's light like smoke against fire. The room gasped. The girl herself looked stunned as the dark mist curled from her skin. Dewey, Gandalf, and Galadriel all wore grave expressions. The witch had clearly touched the ring and been affected by dark magic, but she was not Saruman. Saruman had used subterfuge. He had not revealed himself, but had manipulated others to pass the ring and the vial along, ensuring his tracks stayed hidden. Dean Margales had the girl taken to the infirmary for treatment, and Dewey moved on to the other houses. To his alarm, he found no sign of Saruman's true form, but more students showed traces of the dwarven ring's taint. Several had been exposed long enough that their minds were partially eroded by the dark influence. Children who might, without intervention, have been twisted into servants of the dark arts. Worse, they were all young wizards under his care. What does Saruman want? Dewey ground out between his teeth. The betrayal gnawed at him. Gandalf and Galadriel shared his revulsion. Once comrades in arms, they could not fathom why Saruman had sunk to such methods, using children as his instruments. All contaminated students were sent to the infirmary. Madame Amanda bewailed their plight and railed against the shadowy culprit. Dewey, Gandalf, and Galadriel worked together to purge the lingering dark energies, but some cases were beyond even their combined power. For students like Eamon, who had been exposed for an extended period, the taint ran deep. Galadriel's might could not entirely eradicate it. Reluctantly, Dewey sent for Elrond. He was in Rivendell and would have the skill and authority to help. Dewey made a point of avoiding Arwen in the summons. When Elrond arrived at Hogwarts, he inspected the afflicted children and frowned deeply. When he learned Saruman was likely responsible, the usually serene elven lord showed a cold, lethal disgust. Yet, he was first and foremost a healer. Blessed by Vilya, the Ring of Air, Elrond set to work and largely succeeded in purging the students' minds of the ring's influence, stabilizing them and preventing their wills from being further warped. The crisis had been averted for the moment, but the question of Saruman's identity and his next move hung over the school like a storm cloud. Chapter 347. The Professor Attacked. Thanks to Elrond's treatment, the students only needed regular checkups and were otherwise free to move about and attend classes, even Quidditch. Conservatively, the effects would be completely gone in 2 months, with no lingering danger. Hearing Elrond's assessment, Dewey let out a relieved sigh and bowed his thanks. "Thank you so much, Lord Elrond. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't know how to explain this to the parents." Since he had failed to capture Saruman, who was hiding among the students, Dewey had already considered sending the children home temporarily. Every extra day they remained in the castle increased the risk. Saruman had gone mad, first trying to spread a plague and then using the corrupting power of a dwarven ring to twist the students' minds and wills. Elrond dismissed Dewey's gratitude with a serious look and asked, "What's your plan for Saruman? If he's hiding among the students, their safety is at immediate risk. We can't let this continue. We have to capture him quickly. If he commits another mad act, it may be too late to undo the damage." Elrond added, "Arwen has sensed what's happening at Hogwarts. She only pretended not to know out of respect for your wishes, but she's worried. If this isn't resolved soon, it won't help her recovery." At the mention of Arwen, Dewey felt guilty. He knew she was perceptive. She had likely realized the truth when he sent her to Rivendell to rest before the birth. She had only feigned ignorance so as not to burden him. "Lord Elrond, don't worry. I'll solve this quickly. Saruman won't be able to remain at large for long. The Marauders map I'm making will be finished in a week, and then I'll be able to drag him out no matter where he hides," Dewey promised with confidence. Relieved, Elrond replied, "Then I'll stay and help finish the Marauders map as quickly as possible." Dew beamed. With Elrond's help, the map would be completed much faster. Elrond had already taught himself runes and alchemy while assisting Dewey with the Philosopher's Stone. His mastery of magic and alchemy surpassed Dewey's. With Elrond on board, the work could be cut in half or more. "But we must also protect the students until the map is ready," Elrond said, "and we must prevent Saruman from sensing danger and taking even more desperate measures." Dewey, Gandalf, and Galadriel agreed. Following Elrond's suggestion, the three of them combined the power of the Elven Rings to cast the strongest protection over Hogwarts. Galadriel used the Ring of Water, taking the Black Lake's waters as a medium to weave a powerful barrier that prevented anyone from entering or leaving. Gandalf poured the power of Narya, the Ring of Fire, into every flame in the castle. Wherever those flames burned, they carried light, courage, and hope. They warmed the righteous and tormented those with darkness in their hearts, like the sun on an orc. Elrond used the power of the Ring of Air and a fruit from the white tree in Dewey's garden as a medium to brew a potent protective potion. Borrowing the method Saruman had once used to poison, he blended the potion into the drinks the students commonly consumed. As the students drank, they were silently wrapped in the Ring of Air's protection, so any evil force trying to corrupt them would be blocked until the effect wore off. Because Saruman was now spectral and might possess a student, any such possession would cause him intense pain if the student drank the medicated beverage. To Dewey's disappointment, however, no student showed any obvious reaction. Either Saruman had not drunk the potion, or he had and was concealing his pain. Even so, he was likely struggling. The castle was now brilliantly lit. Every corner glowed. Fireplaces burned in dormitories and common rooms, and candles and chandeliers shone constantly in the great hall. All the flames were suffused with Narya's power. Anyone stained by evil would be weakened and in agony under their light. No disguise would let Saruman avoid the illumination inside the castle. Like a sun-averse creature, he would have to hide his suffering. Outside, Galadriel's barrier closed off any escape. With those defenses in place, Dewey and Elrond concentrated on finishing the Marauders map. Saruman, skulking in the shadows, must have felt the tightening net. That night, Professor Luke, the charms professor on patrol, was on the second floor when he came upon an alarming scene. In a dim corridor, two students lay unconscious in a corner. The nearby portraits were also unresponsive, apparently struck down by the same unknown magic. Luke's expression hardened. He hurried over, knelt, and checked the students. Both were out cold, clearly the victims of a spell. He drew his wand and cast, "Renervate." At the touch of the charm, the students' eyelids fluttered. One of them opened his eyes first and sat up, dazed. "Professor Luke, what happened to me?" Relieved to see him waking, Luke helped him to his feet. "Child, what happened? Who attacked you? Did you see him clearly?" The student opened his mouth to answer, but his face suddenly went pale. He spun around and pointed behind Luke in terror. Luke's face changed. He turned and shouted, "Expelliarmus!" A red jet of light streaked down the corridor, its brilliance illuminating the walls, but there was no one there. Before Luke could demand an explanation, a spell struck him in the back. It hit with terrifying speed and cold precision. His body stiffened, immobile, frozen in place. His face was locked in a shocked expression. Only his eyes still darted, wide with disbelief and fear. The student who had just woken snapped up, coldly blasting the other classmate with a stupefy, then rose and walked slowly toward the petrified professor. Where the boy's features should have shown youth, a cruel, predatory grin spread across his face. He looked at Luke as if appraising prey and said in a voice without warmth, "Professor, I'll be borrowing your body for a while." Chapter 348, Possession. A rush of hurried footsteps approached. "What happened, Professor Luke?" Vice Principal Edward led the other professors toward the commotion. They found Professor Luke standing over two students sprawled on the floor. The nearby portrait lay unconsciously slumped within its frame. Luke's face was grim. "I just got here and found two students on the ground. Even the portrait was attacked." "What?" The professors' faces hardened as they moved closer to the children. Luke raised a calming hand. "Don't worry, I checked them. They were only struck by stupefy, no other injuries. I cast the reviving charm. They should wake up soon." At that, the two students blinked and sat up, bewildered. Vice Principal Edward stepped forward. "Mr. Damon, Mr. Eric, do you remember who attacked you?" Both boys shook their heads. "Professor, we don't remember. We remember leaving the library to head back to the dormitories, and then we were here on the floor." Edward glanced toward the portrait and flicked his wand to lift the magic concealing it. The knight in the painting stirred and peered out at them as if waking from a dream. "Professors, why are you here?" "Sir Knight," Edward asked, "can you tell us who attacked you and those two students?" The portrait's knight frowned and strained to recall. "I didn't see clearly. The attacker was short, probably a student." Another lead lost. Edward's shoulders sagged with disappointment. Just then, Gandalf and Lady Galadriel arrived. Their expressions turned grave as they took in the scene. Neither had expected Saruman to be active again and brazen enough to strike on school grounds. Gandalf and Galadriel examined the two students closely. Their brows tightened as they focused on Damon. They exchanged a loaded look. Through mind speech, Galadriel said, "This boy bears residues of dark power. He has been in contact with a ring before, and there are signs he was possessed." Gandalf nodded. "Saruman has clearly shifted the vessel he controls. We don't yet know whose body he occupies. Because Saruman was a Maya and currently in a soul state, he could slip inside a person's body and remain undetectable even to powerful minds. That made the situation especially dangerous. I just hope Duir and Lord Elrond can produce the Marauder's map quickly," Gandalf muttered. "If we can track him, we can stop him." He ordered that the two students, and Damon in particular, be taken immediately to the school infirmary. Two souls sharing one body, one of them Saruman's, had strained Damon's spirit. He needed cleansing to remove the dark residue and a soul stabilizer to steady his mind. "They're from my house," Professor Luke said. "I'll escort them to the infirmary myself." No one objected, and Luke left with the boys. The remaining professors conducted a careful sweep of the corridor, questioning nearby portraits and watching for anyone acting alone. One portrait complained, "Not many passed by. First two Thunderbird students, then Professor Luke on patrol, and after that the rest of you." "Oh, and someone cast a spell in the corridor," the portrait added. "A red light flashed and nearly struck my frame." Gandalf's expression sharpened. Stupefy does not produce a red light. A crimson burst was more characteristic of Expelliarmus. Yet neither student had been disarmed. Something didn't add up. He asked the portrait, "Did that spell occur before or after Professor Luke arrived?" "After Professor Luke appeared," the portrait replied. Gandalf's face went cold. He had suspected something, but had focused on the students and had not paid enough attention to Luke, the first adult on the scene, who now seemed oddly timed in his arrival and swift to remove the victims. Perhaps Luke's behavior had been a disguise, or perhaps he had used the escort as an excuse to separate them. Galadriel, listening to Gandalf's line of inquiry, realized the implication at once. Without exchanging words, Gandalf and Galadriel hurried toward the infirmary. The other professors, sensing their urgency, followed in uneasy silence. When they arrived, the infirmary was a shocking tableau, beds filled with people who lay unresponsive, students and staff alike. Professor Luke was there among them, unconscious. Most alarming of all, Madame Amanda, the school healer, was not present. Gandalf's heart sank. "We're too late," he said. He turned to Vice Principal Edward. "Edward, order all students back to their dormitories and begin a search for Madame Amanda immediately. I suspect she has been possessed. Proceed with extreme caution. The opponent may use lethal curses." Edward and the other professors reacted with alarm. Seeing the long line of unconscious faces, they understood the scale of the threat and hurried off to carry out Gandalf's commands. "If Saruman has taken Amanda, the other professors won't be able to handle him alone," Galadriel said. "I'll go help." Gandalf's expression softened in gratitude. "Thank you. Duir and Lord Elrond are occupied and cannot be spared. The sooner the Marauder's map is ready, the sooner we can find Saruman." Galadriel nodded and sent a pulse of her mental presence through the castle, seeking traces of Amanda and any sign of Saruman. Gandalf raised his staff and released a purifying light that washed over the infirmary. Slowly, the unconscious stirred and came to. When Luke opened his eyes, Gandalf fixed him with a steady look. "Luke," he asked, "do you remember what happened?" Chapter 349, Marauder's Map completed. Professor Luke's explanation left everyone in stunned silence. At first he had been confused. Then, as memory returned, his face went pale and his voice trembled. "Gandalf, Professor Gandalf," he said, "I saw someone in the shadows. He wasn't human. He was an evil, powerful ghost. I was patrolling the castle and found two students unconscious on the second floor." While I was checking on them, another student, one I didn't recognize, came up behind me and hit me with Petrificus totalis. Then a white spirit crawled out of that student's body, slipped into mine, and took control. I couldn't fight it. It suppressed me instantly. I had to watch as it used my body to pretend to be me, to take the two students and lead them away, and then go to the infirmary. It took advantage of Madame Amanda being distracted, forced me to attack her with my body, then left my body and entered Madame Amanda's before leaving. Gandalf's face grew grim. What exactly was Saruman trying to accomplish? Possessing Luke, then Amanda, slipping between hosts, this was no random spree. It looked like a desperate search for something. Footsteps thundered in the hallway. Edward floated an unconscious Madame Amanda into the infirmary with a levitation charm. She was pale and out cold. "Where did you find her?" Gandalf asked. Edward's face was grave. In an empty room on the 5th floor, she'd already been rendered unconscious. The portraits say she'd been trying to find something. She even forced her way into the principal's private tower and tried to leave through the fireplace there. But all public fireplaces in the castle have been shut down by the principal, so when she failed, she left the tower. We found her collapsed in a room on the 5th floor. Madame Galadriel said the ghost had already left Amanda, Edward continued, and the portraits show Amanda contacted many students after she left the infirmary. Those students have gone back to their dormitories and talked to others. That means any student could have been possessed, and even some of the professors may not be safe. Gandalf's eyes narrowed. He was looking for a fireplace. He must have sensed danger and tried to escape using the Floo network. Outside the castle, Galadriel had raised a barrier using the Ring of Water. In ghost form, Saruman could not simply slip away beyond it. If trapped and caught now, he would face true death with no chance of resurrection. The castle housed 3 bearers of the Elven Rings and Duir, his mortal enemy. Fleeing was the only option left for Saruman, and the Floo network was the obvious route. But Duir had already shut down the public fireplaces in the school. Only the principal's private fireplace remained active. Saruman's frantic possession of people made sense. He was trying to reach that one working fireplace and escape. Gandalf also remembered the vanishing cabinets. "They must be secured," he said. "We cannot give him any route of flight." Edward nodded. "They are. The principal ordered them placed in the underground treasury, guarded by Smaug. They're secure." "Good. We must catch this shadow and not let him slip away." Gandalf, Galadriel, and the other professors then began combing through everyone who had been in contact with Madame Amanda. Several students showed signs of possession, but most had been hit with Obliviate and had no memory of it. The affected students were spread across all 4 houses. No one could be certain who might be carrying the ghost. The thought of such a cunning Saruman slipping between hosts left the staff unsettled. Meanwhile, in an undisturbed office, Duir and Elrond worked without rest. After 3 days and nights of tireless cooperation, the Marauders' map was finally complete. The map was crafted from a single piece of dragon hide and covered not just Hogwarts, but Hogsmeade and Bree, stretching east to the Last Bridge, south to the South Downs, west to the Barrow Downs, and north to the North Downs, essentially the whole central region of Eriador. It was astonishingly detailed. Elrond had filled in the lands outside Hogwarts, and with more time, he could have expanded it even more. Every person within the mapped area was listed on the map. Their names moved as they did. Thanks to the combined artistry of Duir and Elrond, the map's magic went far beyond what Duir remembered from the old Marauders map. It could zoom in and out, present a 3-dimensional view, and, with a tap of a wand on a name, transform that name into a miniature 3-dimensional figure so one could watch a person's movements in real time. Normal, harmless people showed up with gem-green names. Those with malicious intent flashed scarlet. The map was like a lifelike miniature of central Eriador laid on dragonhide. The first thing Duir did after it was finished was check for Saruman. He spread the map across the desk and tapped at the area for Hogwarts. The castle zoomed in, becoming clearer and clearer. Duir muttered as he searched. There were more than 200 names inside the castle, which would normally take time to scan, but the map made the answer obvious. Saruman's name stood out, scarlet among a sea of gem-green names, as if written in blood. but there was another name directly overlapping Saruman's. Dewey's pupils constricted, and his expression hardened. "How could it be him?" he whispered, filled with disbelief and anger. Chapter 350, Brief Calm. Since the attack on the professor, the castle had been on edge. The professors divided the duties between them, patrolling constantly and keeping a close watch on the students. Except for classes, students were forbidden to be anywhere but their dormitories or the Great Hall, and they were required to move in groups. Every portrait had been put on duty. At least one person in every frame was tasked with watching the exterior and reporting any suspicious activity to nearby professors or other portraits. The normally silent suits of armor had all come to life and were patrolling the halls. "Are the students in all the houses holding up? No panic or other bad feelings, I hope," Vice Principal Edward asked Professor Luke as they walked the corridors together. Although Professor Luke had been attacked only a few days before, he had recovered quickly and rejoined the patrols and protection detail. "They're fine," Luke replied with a smile. Aside from complaints about the Quidditch match being canceled, they haven't shown much negativity. They have complete faith in the principal, especially the younger students in our section. They're convinced the principal will catch that rat hiding in the shadows soon. Edward nodded, respect and trust on his face. It seems the children, like us, believe the principal can resolve this crisis. "I never doubted him," Luke agreed. "He's the one who turned us from mere mortals into wizards. He's been in seclusion preparing. Once he emerges, he'll catch that rat and restore order." "I think so too," Edward said. "All right, Professor Luke, we'll split up here. You patrol from the 4th floor upward. I'll take the 4th floor and below. Be careful. This shadowed figure has been quiet the last few days. It might be plotting something. Send a signal at once if you find anything." "I understand. After what happened, I'll be extra cautious," Luke promised. They parted, Luke going up, Edward going down. Edward descended floor by floor, checking in with the portraits as he passed. After finishing his inspection, he didn't rest. He went to Dewey's private tower and knocked gently on the door. "Come in," came Dewey's voice. Edward entered the private sitting room and approached the portrait of Dewey by the fireplace. Bowing respectfully, he spoke. "My lord, we're short-staffed at the school. Besides teaching, the professors are on protection and patrol duty constantly. Could we wake the sleeping dragon Smaug and the basilisk Herpo to help guard the castle?" Dewey's painted face considered the request. At the moment, there were only 11 people able to help in the castle. The 8 professors, Dewey himself, Madame Amanda from the infirmary, and Elrond, who had only arrived a few days earlier. Dewey and Elrond were busy making the Marauders map. The remaining professors were teaching by day and guarding by night, one professor on duty in each house dormitory and the rest patrolling the vast castle, kept going by invigoration potions brewed by the potions professor. After a moment, the portrait nodded. "I have a frame in Basilisk Herpo's Chamber of Secrets that answers only to me. I'll rouse it and have it patrol the castle's pipes. As for Smaug, you go wake him," Dewey instructed. "Understood, my lord," Edward said and left. He took the key and made his way to the dungeons. At a mithril door engraved with the warning, "Do not disturb sleeping dragon," he inserted the key and spoke the password. The lock clicked and the door swung open. As Dewey's butler, Edward was one of only 3 people, along with Dewey and Arwen, authorized to enter the dragon's treasury. A previous incident with spider silk cloths had brought him into contact with Smaug, and as a dragon who loved gold, Smaug had come to appreciate Edward when the butler brought coins into the hoard. The scent of him awakened the great beast at once. Smaug, having consumed the frost dragon's dragon crystal, had grown to an immense 500 meters in length. Though he had not taken on any frost magic, his fire had become fiercer, rivaling the ancient dragons. He lifted his enormous head from the mountain of treasure and peered suspiciously at Edward. "You come empty-handed, Butler Edward," Smaug grumbled. "What is your business? You aren't planning to steal my gold, are you?" Edward, taken aback by the dragon's size, quickly shook his head and explained, "No, my lord. Dewey sent me. An enemy is hiding among the students and has already caused trouble. The professors are stretched thin. We need you to come out and help protect the castle." Smaug blinked. "An enemy? If the master is as cunning as they say, why would he need me? That enemy is cunning, like a phantom who can possess people. Even the Lord Gandalf and Lady Galadriel can't see through it, Edward said. Smaug's eyes widened with surprise. If such powerful beings couldn't perceive the threat, it must indeed be formidable. He leaned forward, scrutinizing Edward. If it can possess people and evade even the Lord, then you haven't been possessed, have you? Are you trying to distract me so you can pilfer my hoard? Edward bristled at the accusation. Lord Smaug, I would never. That enemy would be a fool to possess someone right in front of you. Smaug snorted proudly. I, Smaug, am the mightiest dragon in Middle-earth. Anyone who dares to steal so much as a single gold coin in my presence will face my fire. All right, Lord Smaug, I have delivered Dewey's message. I must resume my patrol, Edward said. As he turned to leave, he noticed a pile of vanishing cabinets tossed aside in a corner and sighed. Lord Smaug, those vanishing cabinets are valuable alchemical devices. Please don't ruin them. Smaug glanced at the cabinets, disdain curling his lip. A pile of wood, he said. They're nothing compared to my gold. If I roll over, they'll be crushed. If I sneeze, they might catch fire. Where else would I put them? Edward shook his head, unable to convince the dragon. He bowed and took his leave, returned the key to Dewey's tower, and resumed his rounds through a castle that, for the moment, held a fragile, watchful calm. Chapter 351, Exposure. Smaug left the treasury and climbed through the dragon passage carved into the cliff face on the north side of Weathertop. He was too massive to enter the castle, so he settled on the vast lawn outside, his golden bulk towering over the courtyards. From that vantage, he could see everything happening on every floor of the castle at a glance. The sight of Smaug sent a ripple of astonishment through professors and students alike. Many had heard of the dragon but never seen one. Even those who had met him before were taken aback by his current scale. After the first shock faded, most recovered quickly. What enemy could intimidate them when a dragon of that size was allied with the school? Students from every house pressed to their dormitory and common room windows, eyes wide with reverent awe and a fierce, forbidden longing. Is this really Principal Dewey's dragon mount? He's enormous. Then, Dewey's voice rang out, booming through the castle. All students, return to your dormitories immediately. Do not leave your rooms. All professors, report to the conference room at once. The principal is outside, the students whispered. Relief and hope spread among them. Only one person in the crowd shifted uneasily. His expression darkened. The students obeyed instantly. As they retreated, the entrances to the house common rooms automatically slid shut and locked. Even with the correct passwords, the doors would not budge. Anyone trying to slip in would be forced to blend with the students and abandon the attempt. Professors, hearing Dewey's summons, hurried to the conference room. Professor Edward, a voice called. Edward paused and turned to see Professor Ellensis, out of breath and a little pale, hurrying toward him. Professor Ellensis, Edward said, softening at the sight of his colleague. You came from the potions office? Slow down. Catch your breath. Ellensis, potions master and dean of Basilisk House, smiled faintly. His office lay near the Basilisk dormitory on the first basement level. He spent most days brewing remedies for the infirmary, which left his skin a little sallow and his hair often greasy. Unlike some reserve figures, he was chatty. Walking beside Edward, he asked, Do you think Principal Dewey calling us now means he's found the hidden person? Edward shook his head. I don't know. He said he was preparing something to catch whoever's been in the shadows. If he's come out, perhaps he's finished. That would be wonderful, Ellensis said. I hope whoever it is gets caught quickly so we can all breathe. Noticing the fatigue furrowing Edward's brow, Ellensis fumbled in his pocket and produced a vial. Here, an energy potion I just brewed. Drink it. Don't overwork yourself. Edward began to reach for it, grateful. Thank you. I do need this. It won't do for Principal Dewey to see me like... A magic barrier sprang up between them at that instant, appearing from nowhere and preventing their contact. Both men jerked back, drawing their wands and swiveling toward the source of the spell. Dewey and Elrond were already approaching with several other professors. Ellensis blinked at the barrier in confusion. What is this for? He asked. Dewey said nothing. Elrond addressed Ellensis. Professor Ellensis, please come over here. Ellensis looked from Elrond to Dewey and then at Edward, who stood isolated behind the shimmering wall, and puzzled but obedient crossed to the other side. Dewey's gaze never left Edward. It was icy and unrelenting. He sneered, "Saruman, I destroyed your body back then, but your spirit escaped. I didn't expect you to dare come to the castle and hide in plain sight. Did Sauron give you that courage?" Edward's face registered genuine bewilderment. "Principal Dewey, what are you talking about? I'm not Saruman. You must be mistaken. How could I be him?" The professors exchanged uncertain looks. They had worked with Edward for years. He had been Dewey's trusted deputy. The idea that he might be possessed was unthinkable. Yet Dewey and Elrond showed no hesitation. Dewey shook the dragonhide map in his hand and sneered, "Saruman, you hid yourself well. Even Gandalf and Lady Galadriel and I failed to detect you for a long time. But however well you hide, my marauder's map will not be fooled." A ripple of magic rolled across the map, and every professor saw the name over Edward's position change. Where Edward had been, blood-red letters blazed. Saruman, Kurumo. Kurumo, Saruman's true name in Valinor, followed by his Middle-earth name. At the sight of the map, Edward's composed face fell away. The familiar smile slipped into something cold and cruel. His eyes flashed with venomous resentment. He did not try to deny it any longer. "Very impressive, Dewey," he said in a voice that did not quite fit the man everyone knew. "I once thought you insignificant. I did not expect to be hunted by you over and over. I remember when I was destroyed and reduced to a vagabond spirit. What can you do now? Kill me." He laughed, a triumphant, bitter sound. "If you want to kill me, you'll have to kill this body first. He was your most trusted servant, loyal enough that he would have died for you rather than let me use him. Too bad his spirit was weak. He couldn't resist me, couldn't even end his own life. Would you be so heartless as to let your most loyal servant die with me?" With that, the figure behind the barrier flicked his wand and shattered the protection with a forceful spell. Then he pointed it at Dewey and the gathered professors and shouted, "Confringo!" Dewey flicked his own wand in reflex. The blasting curse slammed against his counterspell, glanced off, and struck the castle wall instead. Stone exploded outward. A huge hole appeared where the masonry had been, sending dust and rubble flying in a thunderous roar.